Big shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Much appreciated, guys. Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam, and unfortunately that's just male spelled backwards. And today we are here with a long time coming video discussing the gods of One Piece, a very meticulous and subtle realm of the world crafted by Oda that generally goes unnoticed by many casual enjoyers of cartoon piracy. Because as we know, the story of One Piece operates on a layered system. The first layer is Luffy's journey, the prime immediate focus. Above that is a narrative of the world around the Straw Hats, politics, fighting factions, big picture stuff. However, behind that layer we also have the story of the past, playing out as we gradually learn more about Roger, Laugh Tale, and just generally how things came to be how they are. But even behind that there is another layer of ancient history exploring concepts like the Void Century, Joy Boy, the Great Kingdom, ancient weapons, and so on and so forth. And generally that's where we stop. However, even beyond that, we have the layer of the gods. These subtle yet eternal existences that have no established time period. So in many ways you can consider the story of One Piece as being akin to a gigantic weddingu keiki with many delicious tears to consume. And today I want to examine the juicy base of that there cake. Except cakes aren't really meant to be juicy, are they? Moist, yes, but not juicy. Doesn't matter though, because it's all going to begin with a quick round of God or Fraud, a very simple minigame, the rules of which are as follows. Here we see three mighty god Usopps. However, one of these gods is a filthy imposter, and it is going to be your job to guess which one it is. Should you guess incorrectly, then your punishment will be to subscribe to the Grand Line Review, also resulting in consistent injections of One Piece culture administered directly into your YouTube feed. And if you are correct, then you will be awarded the status of Apprentice God Usopp. So which Usopp will it be? Make your choice now and we shall reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1, and bam, it is this one, who as it turns out was Foxy all along. So that's upsetting for many reasons. But if you guessed incorrectly, then you know things to do, and please do say hi in the comments below if you are a new member of the Grand Fleet. Welcome. So to begin, I do have to warn anime-only watchers that this discussion may have been prompted by recent manga events. We were given a title and a silhouette of a certain character, both of which you have heard and seen before, although you may not realize it. So if you want absolutely no spoilers at all, then this here is your warning. Otherwise, we are going to continue examining this new silhouette of the sun god Nika. Having been mentioned in chapter 1018, neither for the first nor the last time, and this individual is by far our most prolific god of One Piece. In the context of the chapter, the sun god title is implied to be a legend, and that legend is demonstrably known by a wide variety of different societies in this piratey world. To illustrate, the sun god was mentioned in Nolan's flashback on several occasions. The Shandian tribe had a practice of making sacrifices specifically to the sun god, during one of which is when Nolan famously interrupted and did his Nolan thing. And at the time, the term sun god, to be honest, was utterly meaningless. It seemed like a bit of a tribe-specific belief and a bit of flavor to construct the sacrificial ceremony for story purposes. However, cut to approximately 1 billion chapters later to Big Mom's flashback, and we have the sun god mentioned once again by Mother Carmel, who uses the excuse of the sun god, rather ironically, to hide her devil fruit abilities. Which is fascinating because that is now two, for all intents and purposes, completely isolated civilizations who hold a belief in this same sun god figure. And yes, I suppose it is conceivable that the Shandians and the Obathian giants came up with their own independent sun gods. I mean, every ancient society worships the sun in some way or another. You know, the Romans had Apollo, the Egyptians had Ra, and Yu-Gi-Oh players had the winged dragon of Ra. So every weird subculture does find a way to worship the sun. However, this is our third mention on Wano, and that is painting a much less coincidental and more intentional picture. And in fact, it goes to great lengths to connect these ideas together. The silhouette of the sun god Nika is evocative of the Shandian tribe due to the garb, but much more importantly than that, we've actually seen this silhouette before. Sort of. In one of Oda's favorite panels, by the way, which is this one of the Skypiea party. This is often cited as his third favorite panel in the entire series, and the reason why he wanted to draw the Skypiea arc to begin with. And for an awfully long time now, that's been very confusing because yes, it's a beautiful panel, but like, that's why we went through the Skypiea arc? Okay. But as it turns out, this panel had a lot more meaning than most of us realized. Because looking very closely at the fire figures, we can see that Luffy shares an extraordinarily similar silhouette to our sun god. And Oda lingers on this image, making sure to burn it into our minds, because on the next page he repeats this figure of Luffy and places emphasis on it by making him the only solid figure, with the other two around him being illuminated by radiant light. Oh, and also Wiper is seeing this and he's going, whoa. like in awe. And we'll get to the Luffy connection in a bit because there are a ton of implications there, but this is our first solid tie into the concept of gods and what they mean in One Piece, by which I'm not referring to literal deity-like existences, but the term god applying to mortal figures who have simply become larger than life, like God Usopp, and I am being 100% serious when I use him as an example. Sticking with our sun god for a moment though, it's important to note that One Piece does have several grand motifs at play, one of which is the importance of sunlight. Something that I clearly do not get anywhere near enough of because I spend all of my time in a very dark room talking about cartoon pirates. For example though, both of the societies I've mentioned have a particular worship of light. In regards to the Shandians, their prized possession is known as the Light of Shandora. In the case of Elbaf, they celebrate the winter solstice, a festival honoring the death and rebirth of the sun. And we can find this elsewhere as well. On Fishman Island, their entire culture is based around the Sunlight Tree Eve, and their dreams are to live under the sun on the surface. The Sun Pirates even adopted that symbol for their own pursuit of hope, which may very well have a direct connection to the sun god due to the circumstances surrounding Fisher Tiger. The Mink tribe hold a belief in the concept of the dawn of the new world, and the flag representing the nation of Alabasta is a literal sun. So there's an awful lot of bright, sunny style business here. And the ever intriguing thing about these nations who have a vested interest in light is that bar Elbaf, they were all confirmed allies of either Joy Boy or the Great Kingdom. Shandora fought alongside the Great Kingdom during the war. Alabasta was trusted with the knowledge of and perhaps even the ancient weapon Pluton itself, and of course Fishman Island has a direct link to Joy Boy through Poseidon. And as for Elbaf, I would speculate that it does have a similar connection. That massive straw hat of Marjois certainly does imply some giant involvement in efforts against what would become the world government. And speaking of, the sun god does not exist in a vacuum, because other forces have perpetually popped up to stand against it, namely those of darkness. Ooh, scary darkness. And the first example of that comes to my mind is Eem. The five elder stars chose their wording very carefully when they inquired as to which light Eem wanted erased from history. And the world government itself generally operates with a shroud of darkness, whether that be its hidden king Eem or stuff like Cypherpole, secret agents operating in the shadows, or even the actions of the world nobles, which represent the darkest aspect of humanity in all regards. Elsewhere, you have quite literal representations of darkness, such as Blackbeard with the Ami Ami no Mi, very conveniently set up to become the ultimate antagonist of the series, I suppose. And we even have at least one literal devil being referred to, which is the Sea Devil, the being that all devil fruit abilities are said to be some form of incarnation of. So forces past, present, and speculative do stand in opposition to our light-based goodness. But the One Piece world does also have gods that stand adjacent. And one thing I'd like to point out in all of this sun god hysteria is that it's only one of 4 gods that the Shandians worshipped. In the sacrificial sun god chapter, they also offer words to the god of forest, the god of rain, and the god of earth, which is one of the reasons why the concept of a sun god carried so little weight back then, because it seemed like a mere part of a fabricated fictional religion. But we do now have to question that, because at least one of the 4 Shandian gods does seem to have a solid historical basis, so the others might as well. But this is very much where we get into the territory of how one is defined as a god, because these designations are not assigned by any sort of divine authority, rather they seem to be labels applied by mortal people. And a good instance of this is going back to Big Mom's flashback, because during her hunger tantrum, Charlotte Lin Lin is referred to as a god of disaster, something that is completely out of the control of standard living beings, and hence why I guess Mother Carmel used the excuse of the sun god stepping in to quell the god of disaster. But Charlotte Lin Lin is no such thing. At least not in the way that we would apply the term god. She's uncontrollable, yes, and that does seem to be our key criteria for godhood in the series. Take Wano as another example. The character of the mountain god is just a big old piggy that no one was capable of defeating. Although, to be fair, maybe Amasan actually is a god because Odin did slice him horizontally in half and he did not die, so that seems pretty godlike to me. Elsewhere, the world nobles actively refer to themselves as gods, and that does fit with our classification system. Currently, the world nobles are a force that no other can control, so the title of god is actually quite fitting, unlike their faces, which fit no one and are an abomination of nature. And I should say this also works in rather comical ways, which I alluded to before, with our ridiculous example being God Usopp. It is a meme both in and outside of the One Piece world, but it is completely consistent with our knowledge of gods. On Dressrosa, Usopp was an unstoppable force of anarchy, so of course he was granted the title of god. And speaking of Dressrosa, figures are also designated as the opposite of a god, such as with Dolphin Doflamingo, a fallen god who is referred to as a demon, the heavenly demon to be precise. And he's far from the only one either, because other examples include Luffy, who is known as the demon sheriff, Virgo was demon Bamboo Virgo, and even Kalgara was referred to as Shandora's demon. And there are about a billion other references to gods and demons in One Piece. For example, the Skypian leaders take on the title of god, the ancient weapons, they're all named after gods, and God Valley, that's a pretty big deal for some reason, and so on and so forth. But all of this brings us to the ultimate idea of our next god in One Piece. Monkey D. Luffy, the man who currently personifies what we know of as the Sun God, a man who Pedro has linked to the dawn of the world, a man who helms a ship called the Thousand Sunny, and someone who is actively working to achieve Kozuki Toki's prophecy of bringing about a radiant dawn currently on Wano. And even outside of this sun god connection, Luffy has been equated to a deity on several occasions. During Skypiea, the entire climax involved the Sky Citizens desperately praying for a god to save them, and during that Luffy vs NL climax, he certainly does deliver what they asked for, very dramatically negating NL's attack and even yelling, "Let the sun shine." Now, I'm no sun god, but if I was, then let the sun shine would be a thing that I say. On Wano, Luffy is being quite literally compared to a god by Hyogoro, who refers to his Gear 4th form as looking like a guardian deity. And that form itself is of course inspired by the Neo, who were the dual guardians of Buddha. So as much as it's not really too One Piece-y, Luffy himself does have a lot of connections to spirituality being explored, and the very relevant question to ask is whether or not he is the current incarnation of our sun god Nika. That, or what even was the sun god Nika? Is he just a Luffy who lived a couple of thousand years ago? We can also ask ourselves if the Sun God is another name for Joy Boy. Are they one and the same, or are they two separate entities? Perhaps the Sun God is the true beginning of this inherited world business which got passed on to Joy Boy and now resides within Luffy in the modern day. Or once again, maybe the Sun God and Joy Boy are two entirely different things. We've recently had hints of both Luffy and Momonosuke have separate yet equally important parts to play in the future, so it's not necessarily all about this one centralized figure. With that said, I think at this point in the story there is absolutely no doubt that Luffy is being positioned as the new form of this sun god, whatever that is. If it is indeed anything, might just be something that people make up. Humans tend to do that. But Luffy was actually positioned that way long before we even knew there was a sun god to be taken seriously. So this is clearly something that Oda has been thinking about at least since the days of Skypiea, which I will remind you ended in 2003, which is a long time ago. So we've had another 18 years since then for Oda to be working on building this layer. And if anything, this whole god exploration has convinced me more and more that Blackbeard will be Luffy's final antagonist. It just seems to fit a little bit too perfectly. Luffy, the personification of light and goodness, versus Blackbeard, a man who conjures and becomes literal darkness. And he also probably smells bad. And who knows, by the end of the series, we might even be looking back on the title of the very first chapter, Romance Dawn, and seeing it in a very different light. Pun partially intended. But it's also something to keep in mind with all of our other characters. The status of gods and demons can be applied to anybody. Zoro also comes to mind. His demonic motifs certainly do fit that category. We've already explored the hilariousness of God Usopp, but remember that Nico Robin is also known worldwide as the Demon Child. So in many ways, what we're reading right now could be laying the groundwork of thousands of years of in-world history and mythology. Just like how we're speculating and pondering over the Sun God today, these legends could be passed down so that people in the future of the world of One Piece will be someday speculating about God Usopp and the Demon Child as if they were literal supernatural entities. So I really like what Oda is doing here, essentially showing us in real time how one ascends to the status of a mythical deity legend and then contrasting that against figures who already inhabit that status. Oh, and also let's not forget the time that Oda did depict a quite literal god, but that was in his one-shot manga called God's Gift for the Future, which is basically Death Note because God gives a human a notebook and whatever he writes in that book will come true. Except Oda wrote it a full decade before Death Note, so But something that is not is Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Squarespace gives you a powerful and versatile platform to craft not only your own website, but also your own community. It does this through a combination of powerful blogging tools, Squarespace extensions, and displaying posts from your social profiles. Connect with your audience and generate revenue through gated members-only content. Manage your members, send email communications, and leverage audience insights all in one easy-to-use platform. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you are ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/grandlinereview to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And then after that, go and grab yourself some more One Piece from this here video. There is always more to learn, experience, and enjoy about the series, so I look forward to seeing you there.